Hi, welcome to Chapter 11. We're going to get into what is called menu-driven programs. Think of a program where we have some type of a display for the user to say, hey, what do you want to do in this program? Do you want to do A calculation, B calculation, C calculation? Allows the user to select one of those menu items, and it will basically then process that particular code. So four different sections: introduction to the menu-driven program, how to modularize it. You'll see how much better it looks when it's modularized and how easy it's a lot easier to maintain when it's modularized. How to use a loop to repeat a menu, and then we'll talk about multiple level menus, or what I like to call sub-menus. So basically, here is a concept of what a menu would look like. Here's a mailing list menu. Select 1 if you want to add a name to the list. Select 2 if you want to delete a name from the list. 3 if you want to change a name from the list. 4, print the names in the list. And then it says enter the selection. So that's basically what the menu would consist of in its simplest format. So let's say in this particular case we have a situation where we want to convert inches to centimeters, convert feet to meters, and miles to kilometers. And here is the calculation for each one of those different processes. So our menu would look like this: 1, convert inches to centimeters; 2, convert feet to meters; and 3, convert miles to kilometers. Enter your selection. So what that would look like in pseudocode, now again, realize we are dealing with pseudocode, we're not actually dealing with programming languages. So this is to get us in that mindset once we get into writing an actual programming language, we can basically transfer this logic to that. So first thing we do is we declare an integer menu selection. So we're going to use an integer. We're going to declare real inches, centimeters, feet, meters, miles, and kilometers. So we basically have created 6 variables, and they're all decimal types, so that's a real. So then what we do is we just display menu, display 1, convert inches to centimeters; 2, convert feet to meters; 3, convert miles to kilometers, and then display a blank line. So that's really all there is. Just that is displayed to the user. And then we say enter the selection of your enter your selection, and we say input menu selection. So whatever the number they basically select, we bring it in. So the very first thing we'll talk about now is this new thing called a select case. Now the thing about a select case is we're going to give you a lot of choices. So it's a decision tree structure. I think we've covered this a little bit in the decision section. So here's the select case. So we say select menu selection. So whatever the user typed up here in an integer format, we say case 1. That means if they selected number 1, we're going to display into the number of inches. We input those inches. We set centimeters equal inches times 2.54. We display that is equal to centimeters. Okay, so this is the variable, this is what's being displayed. We do the same thing for feet. We got a calculation for that. We do the same thing for kilometers. We have the input feet, we have them input miles, and then we show them in those respective amounts. And then we have a default, meaning if they selected anything but 1, 2, or 3, or typed anything but 1, 2, or 3, we would display that as an invalid selection. We basically end that, and we're basically done. So again, what would be displayed is those 3 selections. We'd enter selection, we would type in inches, that is equal to that centimeters. Here's basically what it would look like in feet. Here's what it would look like in kilometers. So pretty simple process. We display the menu, we display the selection criteria, we get that selection criteria, we then get input from them depending on what they're trying to convert, and then we display the conversion. So this is what it would look like in a flow chart. So here we have our start. Here's our declare. I don't know why they put start to the side. I could save a little room, but here we declare all of the variables. We display 1, convert inches, display convert feet, convert miles, and then we display a blank line, and then we input the menu selection. So we're basically going to get a numeric value from our user. Then here is our select case menu selection. And if they type in a 1, we basically do all of that for the inches to centimeters. If they typed in a 2, we do that. 3, do that. If they type in anything else but 1, 2, or 3, we display that as an invalid selection, and then we end the program. Okay. Again, this is what the pseudocode would look like. So here we declare all of the variables. We display the number 1 menu selection, number 2 menu selection, number 3 we display a blank line. We display enter your selection. We then, again, that's an integer data type that we collect, and we display what they're doing here is they're trying to show us what would look like in an if-else situation. And again, that's what it would look like in an if-else situation there as well. So once we get our program or our logic kind of straight, how do we validate? So basically, I don't want to have to always rely on that default program, because I want to keep the program flowing. I want them to basically keep typing until they get a correct item in there. So what we could do is this: we display the menu, we then say enter the selection, and then while the menu selection is less than 1 or menu selection is greater than 3, while that is true, we're going to display that as an invalid selection, and we want them to enter a 1, 2, or 3, and then we input that again. So we're going to keep doing that until we get a valid 1, 2, or 3. So once we get out of that while loop, we have a 1, a 2, or a 3. So we don't have to worry about a default or an else or anything like that. We know that we have a 1, 2, or 3 at that point. So here's our select case. So you notice we've got a case 1, case 2, case 3. There's no difference between that and what the code was above. But notice there is no default that we have to deal with here. Would it hurt to put a default in there? It wouldn't hurt, but it would never be called. So again, we would do the same. Here's how you do it, the flow chart. We would basically have an if statement here. While this statement is true, we're going to keep saying enter a 1, 2, or 3. We get that. We come back around. Did they enter a 1, 2, or 3? If they didn't, we keep going through that. Once we come out of that, when it says false, we know that we have a 1, 2, or 3, and then we can go into our select case. Again, notice there is no default. Okay, so we basically have a menu. We basically get some input from our user, but let's make this program, let's make the coding a lot more streamlined. Let's not have everything inside of the main. Let's split it out. Okay, so that's what this next section basically does. So here we have we declare integer menu selection, then we call display menu the menu selection. So we're going to pass what the user typed in to that, and notice it's a module, it's not a function, because we're not getting anything back. Could we make it a function? Most certainly could. And then we say select menu selection. Now I'm assuming, I would have to assume here that it was passed by reference. It was not passed by value, because we are expecting something to be in menu selection. So come down here to display menu. Sure enough, there's the ref. So meaning that once they change that menu selection, that information is passed. Again, we're passing the reference, the actual address and memory of that physical variable. So when that variable is changed, we basically still have that variable back. And again, a little bit of review from previous chapters. So then if they do us case 1, we're going to call inches to centimeters. If we do a case 2, we call feet to meters. If 3, we call miles to kilometers. So what we then do is, again, within our display menu, we do have a while statement making sure we get a 1, 2, or 3. So here is inches to centimeters. We declare the real inches and centimeters, and we display, enter the number of inches. We input inches, then we convert it to centimeters. We then display that. So the really nice thing about this, doing modularization, notice in the previous example before this, we declared inches, centimeters, feet, meters, kilometers, and miles. We declared all those variables. Well, in this case, if we're doing just inches and centimeters, we declare it within that module. Since we're not doing feet and meters, we don't need to declare those. So there's actually, it's not so much saving space, but it's one or two steps we don't have to do. Okay, so again, if we call feet to meters, we declare those within that module. We basically then run our conversion process. So again, look how simplistic this main looks in a flow chart. We display our menu selection. That's going to call a module. We got our menu selection. If it's a 1, we call inches to centimeters. If it's a 2, we call feet to meters. If it's 3, we call miles to kilometers. Okay, and within our menu selection, we basically display the menu. We then input the selection. We then say, while, this is our while statement, while it's less than 1 or greater than 3, we're going to display, hey, that's an error. You need to type a 1, 2, or 3. And once we come back, that will be passed back to the, because again, we are receiving it by ref, so this is a reference. So then when they basically select something from our menu, we're going to basically do that for inches to centimeters, feet to meters, or miles to kilometers. Okay. So menus are really, it's a really nice way to display some data to the user, let the user select where we want to go within this program, and that's basically where that's the process we're going to do. Okay, so now we're going to get into looping. So the example we have for looping, it says this program you've seen so far in this chapter, immediately after performing operation at a selected from the menu, if the user wants to select any other operation from the menu, he or she has to run the program again. So what they're saying here is we've had our inches to centimeters, feet to meters, and miles to kilometers. What if I wanted to do feet to meters and miles to kilometers at the same time? How could I do that without stopping the program and rerunning it? So what we can then do is use the looping process. Now this should be nothing new. We've seen this type of thing before, where we keep doing until the user enters some type of variable that says, let's stop this program. So here we have declare menu integer menu selection. We call display the menu selection, so we're going to basically, that's no different, we're going to display the menu selection. And then we have a do loop. Okay, we have our do loop. Notice it's a do, meaning we're going to do it at least once, because our loop check is at the end of our loop. Okay, so this is a do while. So here it calls the display menu selection, so we display the menu to the user. We then get the menu selection, so whatever they typed in, we get that, and we see if it's case 1, we do our inches to centimeters, case 2, feet to meters, and case 3, miles to kilometers. Nothing has changed, except now we basically say while the menu input selection is not equal 4. Okay, so what we've done so we have changed our menu selection. We have 1 inches to centimeters, 2 feet to meters, and 3 miles to kilometers. We've added a 4th, which is number 4, to end the program. So if they've typed a 1, 2, or 3, we're going to basically do that particular conversion. Then we come back around, because the menu selection is not a 4, we're going to come back around and display the menu selection again, allowing them to do another conversion. If they type in a number 4, we drop out of that loop and we basically end the program. That's as simple as it gets. Okay, I can't make it any more complex than that. So if you were to take this flowchart and compare it to the other flowchart, the only difference is this check at the bottom. If the menu selection is not equal to 4, if that's true, we're going to come back around and do this process all over again. And that's as simple as it gets, really. There's nothing else that you need to basically do for this particular program. Okay, so here we have Midnight Coffee Roasters, Inc. These programs are used to manage the company's inventory of coffee. Each type of coffee that is in the inventory has a record in a file. Each record has fields indicating the name of the coffee and the quantity in stock. Okay, so we're kind of taking what we've learned in a previous chapter, or we've covered in a previous chapter. We're going to basically bring it into this. This is what we saw in chapter 10. We allow the user to perform the following operations: add a record, search for a record, modify the quantity of an existing record, delete a record, and display all the records. Okay. So what we want you to do, currently all these operations are performed by single operations. Julie, the owner of Midnight Coffees, has asked you to consolidate all these programs. So all the programs we saw in chapter 10, we want to put in one big huge program, but it's going to be menu driven. Okay, so our menu is going to look like this: add a record, search for a record, modify a record, delete a record, display all records, and then end the program. Okay. So our main would look like this. We declare our integer menu selection. Here's our do loop, okay, while checks at the bottom. And first thing we do is we call the display menu, okay, and we're going to pass the menu selection, whatever the user basically typed in. So, so here is our display menu. We are receiving, again, we're receiving the menu selection by reference. So if it gets modified here, we can see that change up above. And we display our inventory menu and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the different options that we saw a second ago. And we display enter your selection, input selection. So whatever the user types in, we're going to capture that, and it's going to be in our selection variable. And then while the selection is not or less than 1 or greater than 6, we're going to display an error message and make them type in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And once we get out of that while loop and we hit end while, we now have a valid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 in our menu selection. Then I take the menu selection and I basically do the case 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't worry about 6 because 6 is our way to, because again, if we typed in a 6, we would not do anything with the select. We would hit this while statement and we would drop out of the while statement and end the program. So that's how the program ends, is basically dropping out of the while loop. So again, 1, we call add record. 2, we search the record. 3, we call modify the record. 4, we delete the record. And 5, we display the records. Now, I don't want to go in each one of these programs because we covered those in chapter 10, because each one of those programs that we covered in chapter 10 is now here within that particular item. Now, this is what the flowchart would look like for our menu selection, or our main program. Here's our menu selection. And then here is our add a record. Again, this is what we've seen in chapter 10. Don't want to go into all that. Here is our search record. Again, that's in chapter 10 as well. Here is our modify the record. Again, remember how we have to basically read each record one by one, and if it's the record we want to change, we then again, we're taking one record from this file and we're creating a temp file. We're writing each record to the temp file. And once we find the record that we want to update, we update that and write it to the temp file. Then when we get done, we delete the old file. We then take the temp file and rename it to the previous file, and now our file's been updated. Here is our delete a record. Same thing, how we do the temp. Again, we're writing from one record to the other. If it's the record we want to delete, we just do not write it to the temp file. And again, we get to the end, we delete the file itself, we rename the temp file to the file name, and we now have the record with out that record that we wanted to delete. So it basically contains all the records but the one we wanted to delete. And then display all the records. Okay. Again, please go through those, understand what's going on. Again, I didn't go into any detail on that because we covered all of those different programs in Chapter 10. Okay, so up to this point, we've had just one item per menu. What if I had a main menu that I wanted to select, and then there's a sub menu that needs to basically, we want to go into it a little deeper. So here's my main menu: process the sale or a return, update the inventory file, print the inventory file, and then exit the program. So if the user selects a 1, we're then going to display this menu: process a sale, process a return, and then go back to the main menu. If they select a number 2 from that main menu, it's going to display this submenu: add a record, search for a record, modify a record, delete a record, go back to the main menu. If they select a number 3 from the main menu, we're going to display this menu which says print an inventory list report, print a list of inventory items by cost, print a list of inventory items by age, print a list of inventory items by retail value, and then go back to the main menu. Okay? So this is what our main would look like. We display the main menu. If they select a 1, 2, or 3, we're going to call one of those perspective modules. Again, if they select anything, if they select a number 4, we're going to basically drop out of there. Here's our sale or return. We display our menu, and then we basically have those 2 selections. We're going to basically call one of those 2 modules. Okay, I think you kind of get the gist here. I display a main menu, and if they select it from that menu, I display another menu for them to select, and then we just do the processing. So it's really nothing more than just a menu and sub-menu. So we're going to display a menu that basically then displays another menu, and then all the processing is basically the same. It's all modularized at that point. Okay. That is basically it for Chapter 11. It's really not that hard of a chapter. You should be, again, we took everything from Chapter 10, we kind of brought it over here, and we basically, so it's not one big huge program, and we can basically then select what we want to do or give the user the selection criteria. Again, any questions, make sure you give me a call. Be more than happy to basically Skype with you and help you out.